We're on the top of Kuf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Kol.
Alan, you're going to take over, right?
Ibaylahu. So we had a kasha. The Gemara has a kasha over here. Okay, where are we? Ibaylahu. So Rabbi Yehuda said that we can't do it after 3 days. So, Lo Kol. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who said that sometimes 3 days is not the exact amount. Every single shah, every single person is different. So the question is, Ibaylahu Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba Lakula Palag Lachumra Palag. I'm going to read quickly today. I apologize in advance. But is it Lakula or Lachumbra? That means, is it Lakula that he says that even more than 3 days sometimes you can identify a body, or Lachumbra that sometimes even less than 3 days you can't even identify a body? Tashmada Gavra de Tava Bekarmi, he drowned in the Karmi, near Karmi. Vyaskua Behedya Labasa Tlasi Yomin, and he brought ashore near Behedya. After 3 days, and Rav Dimi allowed his wife to get married, even though it was after 3 days. He drowned in the Tigris River. We're on the top of Kuf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. And he washed up ashore at the bridge of Shabisna. And Rava let his wife get married on the basis of friends after 5 days. So you see two cases where they let him remarry after 3 days and after 5 days, which seems to imply what? The Rabbi Yehuda is saying Lakula, that sometimes even more than 3 days would be okay to identify a body. Iyamar Bishma Lakula Paliginu, the Avid Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. It became Lakula, so then I understand. That's what they did, like Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. Eliyamar Lachumar Palig Inu David Kaman. If he was coming to say that no, less than 3 days, even sometimes you're not going to be able to identify. So then who are they going like when they gave 3 and 5 days? Shani Maya de Samte. So Maya is different, since these were cases where they drown, so the Maya is going to keep the body even for longer than 3 days. But in general, if it's more than 3 days, so then it would not be okay. Ve'amar Maya Marzumaka. But we said that a Maya is bad for a makkah yesterday. It agitates the wound. So which one is it? So hanimili hechadeka makkah, hechadeka makkah mitzvah samis. You're right. For a wound, the water is not good. But for keeping a body fresh, so then the water does it after 3 days, even though in general they would argue and say that after 3 days would not be okay. Hanimili dichiyaske chazia b'shate aval ishtoi mitbach tapich. And interesting, and it's saying that with water, even the water only works if you see it within an hour of coming ashore. That means if it's in the water for 5 days, you can still identify a body. But that's only if you identify it within an hour of it coming ashore. Once more than an hour passes of it coming ashore, after 3 days, after 5 days, and it's not even clear. It seems like maybe the Gemara would say even within 3 days, you need to identify within an hour. It's not clear, but it's similar to if you put an estrog into a glass container on the side, and you put in a match, and you close the top. So it takes out all the oxygen. I'm not a scientist, but I did this once. It takes out all the oxygen, and the estrog will stay until the next year. As soon as you open up the thing, the entire thing will shrivel up. Same exact thing. So it'll keep it, but as soon as you open it and let the water in, as soon as you let the air in, it'll shrivel up. So to over here, you can identify a body after 5 days in the water. However, you have to identify within an hour. Okay, we'll go 10 more minutes, and then again you can take over. Mishnah: Nafal l'mayi ben shem shlem sof ben shein lehem sof ishto asura. If you fall into a mayim, so if it has a sof or doesn't have a sof, so the ishta is going to be asura. Mayim she'ein lahem sof is one where you can see from all. If I'm standing here, I can see the entire water. She'ein lahem sof means I can't see the entire thing, and it's possible that the guy's going to wash up ashore. So she'ein lahem sof, we'll see that everyone agrees that the ishta is going to be asura because maybe the guy washes up. She'yesh lahem sof, if I could see the whole thing, so if I don't see the guy come up after a certain amount of time, I should assume that the guy is dead. However, the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Meir, as we'll see, says that even if it's ein lahem sof, so the Isha is going to be Asura. And we'll have to understand why. If you could see the entire thing, so then why would it not be? So we're going to explain. Because there are cases where the guy can literally stay there. Again, it doesn't sound like he's going to stay underwater for 3 days. It sounds like he'll pop up his head and you just won't notice it. But it sounds like for 3 days, the guy came out. So even if there's a confined area where you can see the entire thing, we see from here that a guy was able to live in there for 3 days, and you're not going to stand there, obviously, for 3 days waiting to see if the guy pops up. So therefore, you can never make the Ishto mutter based on the testimony. Rabbi Yossi, Maaseh Besuma Shiara Litbo B'Ma'ara, and I guess the other opinion would say that no, if it has a sof, if you can see the entire thing, so you give it the amount of time that the person can theoretically stay underwater, and then once they don't come up, so then you assume they're dead. Rabbi Yossi, Maaseh Besuma Shiara Litbo B'Ma'ara, there was a blind person who went down to the cave, and he went to be Tovel in the cave, Yorad Moshchach, and the person went after him, and they waited the amount of time underwater that he thinks that the guy can live, and when he didn't come up, so they the wives remarry. The guy went into the lake, into the water, and all they came up with was his regel. If it's from the knee and up, so then he can be tinase. Min harkuvo lamata lo tinase. From the knee and down, he can't remarry, because again, we said that once the knee and up, so then he's definitely dead from the wound. From the knee and down, he can't necessarily be tinase. And I guess the Gemara, we didn't get to it today, even in the first year, but the Gemara, I guess we'll have to discuss whether this yam is a yam she'ein lam. So seemingly, what does Rashi say? Right, it must have been a mayim she'ein himself, or else it wouldn't make a difference whether we see the leg or not, because if it was yesh himself, so then the guy would just be dead after the amount of time that kadesha teitze nafsham. Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, nafal amayim bein she'esh himself bein she'ein himself ishto asura de Rabbi Meir. Right, it doesn't matter, even if it's again. Ein himself, we understand for sure why she's going to be asur. That means that it's an unlimited, it's an ocean, because he could wash up ashore anywhere, and he's going to be alive. But the chiddush is that even when it's a confined area that you can see, so she's still going to be asur, because again, we assume that he's able to live for 3 days, and you're not going to stand there for 3 days watching him. No, they agree by an ein himself, because again, he could pop up anywhere. But if I could see the entire thing here, and he doesn't pop up after the amount of time that a certain person is supposed to pop up, that you can stay underwater anymore, so then she's going to be mutter. Hechidami mayim sheyesh himself. So now I just explained what I said outside. How's the case of mayim that has a sof? If you stand there and you can see all the way around. There was a guy who one second.
Seeing with your own eyes or with binoculars?
I don't know. They didn't have binoculars back then. There was a guy who drowned in a swamp in a place called Simki. Anseva Rav Shila L'Debisra, and Rav Shila let his wife go ahead and get remarried. What kind of thing was this? So we'll see in the Gemara. This was a mayim she'ein la himself. This was an open swamp, and you couldn't see the whole thing. So therefore, why would they let them get remarried? Seemingly, everyone would agree that it would be asur, and they were only arguing by a place where you can see. But if it was an ein la himself, then everybody agrees that you can't get remarried. So why did he let them get remarried? Amarle the Rav Shmuel ta nishmasya. Let's put him in chayrim. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Amarle nishlach le. So Shmuel says, "Whoa, why don't we ask him to explain himself before we put him in chayrim?" Bereish shach le mayim she'ein la himself ishto asura muter. So they said to him, "What's the halach in a case where ein la himself? Is it asura mutter shalach lehu ishto asura?" It said ishto is asura, because again he could pop up anywhere. Ve'agma desamke mayim sheyesh himself and mayim she'ein himself. So now they asked him the trick question. The agma desamka is that a yesh himself or ein himself? Shalach lehu mayim she'ein himself. It's a mayim she'ein himself. We got you, because you just told it mayim she'ein himself. The ishto should be asura, and yet you paskined in this case. What you're saying is she'ein himself, so the ishto is muteris. Umar matayim avad hachi tiana mita tayina. He was a big gadol. He was able to admit his mistake. On a sabri came into cover of a kaimu, since the waters are gathered in stagnant kamaim sheish lemself dama. They're like maim sheish lemself alohi, because they don't go anywhere, and if you don't see the guy, he's dead. Kavan de ikka gully, but the Metzias is that by the swamp that there are waves. Amor gully ashpelu. So we have to assume that the waves maybe carried him away, and therefore it's ein la himself. Kari Shmuel led the Rav. So Shmuel called on Rav. Lo yuuna la tzaddik kolon. God's not going to make a tzaddik have a chet, i.e., God prevented you from putting him to cherem before you asked the question and you listened to me, because God doesn't want you to sin by putting him to cherem because a guy made a mistake. Kari Rav allowed Shmuel shua berov yoetz, that we're saved by the yoetz, by the eitzah of the guy who gives us. So he's basically saying, Shmuel, you're right. You saved me because you told me not to put the guy in cherem. Again, I'm sorry, I'm reading very fast. We just have to be finished very soon. Tanya. Amar Rabbi, Shkoyach, we finished Yevamos. Tanya, Amar Rabbi, Maisa b'shnei b'nei adam mekamrin mekrumin b'yardain. They were setting nets in the Yardain. Yardain is ein lahem sof. V'nichnas echad mehem lemechila shel dagim. We went into a burrow of dagim v'shika. Chaim and Rashi explains that it gets up to your neck, and your neck can you still have your head over the water. It's a burrow of fish v'shika. Chaim, and it got dark v'lora pischa shel mechila. He couldn't get out. He couldn't find his way out. He was alive. He could stay there, but he couldn't get out. V'shach haver kadesh teitze nafsha. So his friend waited the amount of time that a person could stay in the water alive, and he said, okay, the guy must be dead. So he went home and told everybody that his friend was dead. Lemachar, they had a nice funeral. Showing up to your own funeral. So this is the case. The guy shows up to his own funeral, and he gives his own hesped as well. So Rabbi said, you see how great the Chamim are. That's why they said that if it's ein lahem sof, so then the woman's going to be mutter. It's going to be usher for this exact case where the guy can just show up. So why don't we say in the mayim sheyesh himself? Why do we let her remarry? Maybe we should say that maybe the guy is really stuck in a mechila and you just don't see him. The Metzias is that they don't have these burrows in mayim sheyesh himself, and therefore mayim sheyesh himself. If you don't see the guy again after a certain amount of time, so then you can assume that he died. Wow. So if the mayim she'ein himself, so we said the guy can wash up ashore anywhere, so therefore the wife's going to be aser. However, that's only regular people. But if you're a rabbi, then your wife can remarry even by a mayim she'ein himself. Why? Look at the side. Isa de salik kala isla, because everybody talks about rabbis, and if he comes up ashore, everybody's going to talk about it, and everybody's going to know that he was saved. The Gemara says velohi. It's not true. Loshna inish da'ama veloshna tzor b'merabana. No, people don't talk about rabbis either. No, I don't think that's what the Gemara means. It means people talk about regular people as well. It means if somebody washes up ashore, everybody's going to know about it, and therefore there will be a kol, and therefore it is still going to be she's going to be aser. Saying we're not going to make. However, diyavadin lechatila lo. The Gemara adds an interesting thing here. We said mayim she'ein himself, you're not allowed to get remarried. If you do get remarried based on the mayim she'ein himself, then we're going to let you stay remarried, except if what? Except if the husband actually shows up. If he shows up, then obviously you're going to have to get divorced. But even though you're not supposed to get married, again, by a yesh la himself, you can get remarried if we don't see the guy. By an ein la himself, maybe he washed up ashore, you can't get remarried. If you go ahead and get remarried anyway, you can stay remarried. However, if the guy shows up, then you're out of luck. Tanya, then you're both dead, yeah. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Gamliel, Pamachat Sayisim Halach Besfina V'Yisi Sfina Achas Nishbra V'Yisi Mistar Al Talmid Chacham Shabbat. I saw a sfina that was broken, and I was worried about the Talmid Chacham in it that may have died, because he was going to sink. Umana Rabbi Kiva, it was Rabbi Kiva. Below and behold, when I got back to the Abasha, Rabbi Kiva showed up and asked me Alacha. Amarti lo b'ni mi helcha. How did you get saved? Amar li daf shel sfina nizdamin li. I found a daf shel sfina v'chol gal v'gal shabalai nenasi lo roshi. I saw a sfina, and every wave that came, I ducked my head, and the piece of the sfina took me. Somebody told me that in the first year, so they quote this at the siyum. How do you survive? You survive. You always take a daf shel sfina with you. Always take a daf of Gemara with you. So we see from here that if a Russia comes to you, you should just bow your head and let him go. Again, this proves how the Chachamim knew everything, that they said a mayim sheyesh la himself is mutter, but a mayim she'ein la himself is asur, because you never know if the guy will reappear. Tanya, it was sinking. Was mitzvah by Talmid Chacham. Who was it? Rabbi Meir Shalis Lamadias Kaputgia Baviyasha V'dan Lefanei Ba'alacha Amarti Lo B'ni Mehelcha. How did you get saved? Amar li Gal Terdani Lechavero. The wave swept me to his friend, and the next wave to its next wave, till I made it. And again, Amarti Bosasha Kamgadon Dir Chamshamar Mayim Sheish himself Ishto Muteris Mayim Shein himself Ishto Asura, again because you can't see and the waves just take you very quickly. Tana Rabbanan Nafal Gover Asin Ma'idin Alav. If you fall into a den of lions, so then you can't be made, because you can't assume a guy died in a den of lions. Wow. L'chafura Malay Nechashim Rakravim Ma'idin Alav. If he falls into a pit of scorpions and snakes, then he for sure died. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Mer Af L'chafura Malay Nechashim Rakravim Ma'idin Alav. Chayshinan Shema Chavarhu. Even if he falls into a thing of snakes and scorpions, you can't assume that he died, because maybe he's a charmer, he knows how to deal with them. Tanakama Agavitsa Maskele. He's saying no, even if he's a charmer, Lamaisa, when he falls in the pit, he's going to fall onto scorpions and onto Nechashim. As soon as he falls onto them, before he even has time to play with them, they're going to bite him and kill him. Rashi explains, what about a Gov Shel Arayos? He says that the Gov Shel Arayos, it's possible that you won't fall onto a lion. If you fall into the corner and the lion happens to not be hungry, he's not going to eat you. Don't try it at home. Tana Rabbanan Nafal Letoch Kivshon. What?
Yosef survived.
Yosef survived, I guess. Tana Rabbanan Nafal Letoch Kivshon Eish Meidin Alav. If you fall into a hot furnace, then you are dead. Liora Malay Yayin V'Shemen Meidin Alav. If you fall into a vat of yayin or shemen on the fire, then we could be made that you died. No, only if you fall into a boiling vat of oil, then you're definitely dead. So but by wine, the mitzvah says that when you fall in, you're going to be able to cool off the wine. Amrulo, don't be silly. Yes, you might call it off for a second, but it'll cool you off right away after that. Amr Rabbi Meir, so therefore if you fall into either one of them, you are dead. Amr Meir, so Rabbi Meir says that there's a ma'aseh, somebody fell into a bor gadol, and again he said that that's his proof that a mayim sheyesh la himself, even a mayim sheyesh himself, which you can see, you still don't go ahead and you still can't get married because of it, because l'maaseh we saw a case where the guy's not going to stand there for 3 days, and we see that the guy can survive for 3 days. Says the Gemara, Tanya Amar Lo Meir Maskir Maisanisim. You can't bring a proof from this case. That was a nace that this guy survived, but most people don't survive for 3 days. Therefore, if it's a Maim She'ein Lahem So, a Maim She'esh Lahem So, you should be able to be made that the guy's dead as soon as the time elapses for a normal person to be able to survive. Maim Maisanisim. Why is it a nisim? He said, if you tell me the nace said he didn't eat for 3 days, Esther says don't eat for 3 days. That's not a nace not to eat for 3 days. No, you can't sleep. So the guy, it must be a nace if the guy survived for 3 days because he couldn't sleep in the water. If you take a shvua, I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, we give you malchus because it's not true. And then you're going to have to go to sleep. Then it's okay to sleep anyway. You probably want to sleep anyway after the malchus. For Rabbi Meir, my time, according to Rabbi Meir, what's the reason that he says that it's not a nace? No, Rav Kahana says you're right. In general, 3 days would be a nace. But in a case where there are arches inside of the mayim, which you can sleep on the arches, then it's not a miracle. No, Rabbanan say no, arches inside of water will be made out of marble, and it's not easy to sleep on them because you're going to slip off. Rabbi Meir, EF Delo Masrich V'ni important. No, Rabbi Meir says in Metzias, we know people that could fall asleep standing up on the subway, and Lamaisa, in this case, the guy fell asleep even for a short time. Tana Rabbanan, wow. So the daughter of Rav Nechunah, who used to dig ditches so that people could drink on their way to Aliyah L'Regel, she fell into a bore, and they said to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, and I guess they were waiting for him to say, okay, she's dead. No, she's okay, he said. So he said, again, this was Benevua sort of, he said, no, she's still okay. In the third hour, he said, no, she just came up. Wow, Amar Lahu biti mi halacha. So they said to her, who got you up? Amar Lo. So she said, Zecher shal rachalim nizamili v'zakin manhigo. In the merit of the sheep, i.e. the ayil shal Yitzchak, and the old man Avram who was leading it, in that merit I got up. Amar Lo. So they said to him, they said to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, Navi ata, how did you know? Amar lahem, I'm not a Navi, lo Navi anochi, lo ben a Navi anochi, ela davar shatzadik mitzatzke bo yikasha bocher. It was impossible, Zaro, it's impossible that she would have died in the ditch, because I say her father built the ditches, and if her father's building the ditches for all of the people to do a chesed for them, it's impossible that she's going to get hurt in those very ditches. Rabbi Abba, however, af pikein meit ben no bitsama. However, his son, Rabbi Chanina's son, Rabbi Nechunya's son died out of thirst. Shemar was fear of Neshara Me'od, because around the people of Hashem they're turbulent mode. What does that mean? Not connected to this story. However, Hakadosh Baruch Hu is medactic very carefully with Talmidei Chachamim, just like a hair's breadth, and he must have done a sin, and then they killed his son. Rabbi Chanina Amar Mehacha Al Naratz Besok Shim Rabba V'Nora Al Kol Sivivav. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is very careful. If a person is walking and he hears a woman say that person died, so now that man can go ahead and testify secondhand that the man is dead and that the woman can remarry. Even if you hear children talking and saying we're going to give a hesped and to bring a kever and we're going to bury ish ploni, now I could go ahead and testify that I heard that. And I can say it whether I'm coming to give kavana to give edus or I'm not giving kavana to give edus. I'm just saying it over. Lamaisa, we believe me when I heard it secondhand from children or from women, and therefore the woman can remarry. No, by Yisrael, and we'll talk about in the Gemara what this means. By Yisrael, then if he has kavana to give edus, then we believe him. If he has kavana to give edus, then we don't give him. Then we don't believe him because he might be lying just to mess them over. But if he just happens to be saying it matter of fact, then we will believe the ovei kachavim. Dilma lo azli. So the Gemara asks, maybe the kids didn't really go. How can we take second hand based on the kids? Maybe the kids didn't really go to the Levaya. You're right. It's not the kids are saying we're going to the funeral. The kids are saying we came back from the funeral, then we can believe them when the guy comes second hand. Come on. Kids we know have pets. They play with their little fish. Maybe they were burying their fish and they called him Shlomo, and then therefore you think Shlomo's dead, and they were burying Shlomo, their fish. They weren't burying Shlomo, the guy you think he was. No, they said, no, you didn't just hear them that they went to the burial. They went to the burial and all the rabbis were there. Now the kasha is if the rabbis came to the burial for the fish also, then you do have a problem. By Novei Kochavim, we don't believe them when he comes to say that the husband died. If he has kavana, because then we're worried that he's just messing over the woman so that she'll get remarried even though the guy's still alive. But if the Ovei Kochavim just says matter of fact, so then we will believe him. No. If he comes to give edus, we'll believe him. It's only when he comes and he says that I want this woman to be matir, now she can go, then we don't believe that. How do we know if he's coming to give edus or he's coming just to be matir? If he comes to Beis and says this guy died, let his wife get remarried, then obviously we're not going to believe him. But if he gives testimony that the guy just died, so then we will believe him. Wasn't there a mice in Oshia where Rebbe fought with 85 Zekanim? Amar lahem lo shano l'shniskam l'hatav l'shniskam l'hoy. They do so edus v'lo hodu lo chachamim. They had an argument back and forth, and the chachamim actually didn't agree with him. And the chachamim said that we're not going to believe in ovei kochavim. Elamasnisan diktani ovei kochavim hayi miskavein ein edu so edus heichem mishkachaza. Our Mishnah implies that if he's miskavein, then ein edu so edus, which implies that there are times we're going to believe in ovei kochavim. And it sounds like that the chachamim held that we never believe in ovei kochavim. Says the answer b'meisiach lefituma. The famous thing by Basa B'chalav too. If he's just speaking in the course of regular conversation, you're right. If he testifies, we're not going to believe him. But if an Ovei Kochavim is speaking in the course of the course of regular conversation, then we'll believe him. He's just schmoozing and says, "Oh, were you there? The guy died. Did you hear the guy died?" Then we'll believe him. But if he comes and even if he testifies without saying she should get remarried, he just testifies this guy died, then we're not going to believe him. There was an Ovei Kochavim who was saying, "Man ika chiv chavai, man ika be chavai." Who's from Chavai? Who's from the house of Chavai? Shachav Chavai. He died. Rav Yosef the debitu, and Rav Yosef let the daughter get remarried based on him, because he wasn't saying let the wife get remarried. He was just saying Chavai died. So if he says Chavai died, that's Mesiach Lefituma, and we believe him. Hahu dahavu kamar vazil vaylai laparsha zriza dahava bepumadisa deshachiv. He's saying oy voy to the swift horsemen in Pumadisa who died. V'answer Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef itema rava the debitu, and they let the daughter get remarried, the wife get remarried again, because the Chacham was just saying a matter of fact. Hahu dahavu kamar vazil manika bechasa tavachasa. He was saying, so they heard an Ovei Kochavim say, who's from the house of Chasa? Chasa drowned. Amar Rav Nachman, Elohim, achlu kavri l'chasa. So Rav Nachman said, oh my God, a fish must have been in Chasa. Midibure de Rav Nachman azla debisu de Chasa v'intzva. Again, they didn't allow her to remarry. Because again, as we'll see, forget about the Ovei Kochavim for a second, this was a Mayim She'ein La himself. That's what we're talking about here. It's a little bit confusing, but we're getting back to the conversation. Yes, we believed, Rav Nachman believed what he heard from the Ovei Kochavim, and he repeated it. But over here, it's a Mayim She'ein La himself, so even though we're going to believe the Ovei Kochavim that the guy's dead, Mayim She'ein La himself, we don't let them get remarried, because maybe he's surface. So, Midibur Der Nachman Azad Debisu De Chas Vinza. But however, the wife went ahead and got remarried. And what did we just say before? V'lo Amru Le V'lo Midi. Nobody said anything. Why? Because what did we say before? Di'avarin L'chachila Lo. We don't let you get remarried by a Mayim She'ein La himself, but if you do, Di'avad, we're going to let you stay. Amar Vashi Shmami Na Hadar Marabanan Mayim Shein Lam Sof Ishto Asura Hani Mila Lechatchila Val Inasiv Lo Mafkinan La Mina Ika Di Amrei. Or we said Answer Rav Nachman Debitu. No, it wasn't B'di'evet. It was Lechatchila. They went ahead and let her get remarried. Why? Amar Chasa Gava Rabba Isav, because he made the mistake and he thought that Chasa was a Gava Rabba, and he thought, like we said before in the Havamina, that a Gava Rabba, if he would actually come service, everyone would talk about it, and therefore it must be, if nobody's talking about it, that he didn't actually die. That it must be that he actually died. Imisa de Salah Kala Islay Lamil. So Veloi, it's not true. Loshna Gavaraba, Loshna Lav Gavaraba. Is no difference between a Gavaraba and a non-Gavaraba. Diavadin Lechatchila Lo. Wow.